Hey everyone, welcome back to Admix for another episode of Giving the Game Away. Today we're going to talk about how the next gaming innovation cycle is looking very, very similar to the internet and how that might translate into opportunities in the short term and long term.
Hello.
Hi, Ian.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Exciting time. Just released my article and I'm excited to just give a bit more context on that.
Great. The article is really interesting to me. I like that you started with Second Life, which it would be great to talk about a little bit, because since we spoke about Second Life last time and I knew nothing, I've done some research, so I now know things.
What have you found?
A lot of stuff. The thing that I found most interesting is how Second Life became this sort of 3D WordPress type thing. At least it's been described as that. And we're going to touch on that throughout this entire thing, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, the democratization of 3D creation and the in-world economy and all that stuff, really fascinating.
That's why they were really one of the first ones to give the ability for the users to make a living, or at least try to sell things and become a platform. So yeah, definitely a pioneer in the space.
Do you think they were ahead of their time, or do you think they came at the right?
No, they were way ahead of that time. I know Philip Rosedale, the founder of Second Life, who then ended up building High Fidelity, which was kind of the same, but in VR, which was also ahead of its time. So, I mean, this guy's just a pioneer of digital identities and virtual worlds, because he was building this since the 90s. Like the population with access on the internet was like a fraction of what it is today. Technology is like, internet was really slow, and they managed to do this kind of persistent 3D virtual world, which was definitely ahead of its time. Yeah,
incredible. I mean, and that's really the most remarkable thing about it to me, is the fact that it allowed people to make a living building 3D furniture and spaces and stuff like that. And I think that's actually, so I'm sorry, I'm taking total spotlight away from you. Talk about, I'd like to talk about it in the modern sense. Like, what did, obviously it started with games, with stuff like Second Life, but now we have stuff like Roblox and Minecraft. What is that sort of development? How did that change? Where has that become? Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. Like, if you look at innovation generally in the digital world, there's a cycle between applications and infrastructure, where you generally have like one use case, someone like a visionary like Philip Rosedale building Second Life. It's an app, and then this inspires new infrastructure, things that then can be used to power the next generation of Second Life or virtual world. And this happened across mobile. This happens in the world of gaming, where you have people building games natively, and then infrastructure like Unity helping people build better games, and then those games like Roblox create an even simpler interface so that you can build games within the game and sell items. And so that's the next level. And so what I was trying to say in this piece is like that kind of innovation in cycles. It's new for gaming, but it happened in the past for all the other big innovation, like the internet. And what's really interesting is when it kind of reaches a point where it's super easy to create content, it's really easy to distribute it, and it's also easy to monetize it. And when you reach these three things, this is where the whole thing really becomes mainstream and everyone starts using it. It's like the early days of the internet. It was a brochure that is completely static and really difficult for people like you and me that might not know how to code to edit, right? It was restricted to an elite that had access to it. And even if you wanted to do that, it was a passion project, because even if you had 1 million people on this site, you wouldn't make money from it. And it was certainly a bit difficult to be discovered, because you had to send a link to everyone. There was no search engines. And so, little by little, these innovations enable people to discover websites. There were blog platforms that had their own search engines to surface the good content. And then like advertising, like AdMob on mobile, but before that, just double click and Google just enabled everyone to make money out of their website, make money out of their creations. And until today, this didn't translate to gaming. Games are basically built by big companies. A little bit with Unity and Unreal, like indie developers are, can actually build games as well. And they can also monetize them, so that's great. But it's still not open to everyone. So the article was showing that with Roblox and other platforms, Minecraft to some extent, they're kind of opening the possibilities for people to interact and to kind of build their own games and even monetize their own games. And I think that's a really interesting transition for games becoming more than games, but platforms, and opening it to a much wider audience.
I find those two examples really interesting, Roblox and Minecraft, for various reasons, especially compared to Second Life. Second Life felt very much like a virtual reality, not VR, but like a digital representation of the real world.
Yeah.
And that was naturally a platform, whereas Roblox and Minecraft feel like they were games first and sort of became platforms.
Yes, and I think that's very smart, because the problem with Second Life and a few of these other platforms actually is that if there is no reason to be part of the game in the first place, because there's no game, it's just hanging out, meeting people, it's not working in the early days. There's not enough people. You have this feeling of, okay, I'm coming here and there's nothing to do. Talking to people or doing virtual things, or like, it only works at scale. So initially you need to build engagement. You need to bring people to the platform. And that's why Fortnite was so smart, creating this game. And Tim Sweeney himself had said, Fortnite's a game now, but it's not what we have in mind for the future. And you can see that now with the virtual concerts. But if it was just a place to hang out and it was a concert every 3 months, it wouldn't have the same engagement and retention. So creating an incentive first, a really good way for people to come and consume that content, that's what's needed before you start thinking about, building a full business model around it.
Yeah, it makes sense as a sort of different life cycle. It's sort of like the next stage of what Second Life, almost what Second Life should have done in a sense. But they're doing obviously really well. It's just that Fortnite and Minecraft is even bigger household names. So in the article, you talk about like 3 major reasons that this revolution is kind of happening. Yeah. We've spoken about democratization of 3D content creation, like no-code editors and Unity and stuff like that. It'd be good to talk about the other 2. So the second is the reach of distribution.
Yes. If you're building something and it's not being discovered, it's kind of dies there and it's not very useful. And that's what search engines on the internet enable to do. You can search for things. You don't need the exact link to go to a specific destination. And currently gaming is very fragmented, right? There's literally millions and millions of games. Discovering games is not as easy as discovering a website. You have the App Store, of course, but it's still controlled by only a few players and not as easy to distribute. And so what companies like Roblox are doing is that they are the game and the engine, and they take care of distribution as well. So within the platform, they would feature the best games. They effectively their own app stores, their own platform. And some of the creators, I think Roblox is going to pay, let me get this right, 350,000 creators this year are making money with Roblox, a total of 250 million. And of course, you have the top 10 people that probably make half of that. It's a very skewed distribution. But anyway, a lot of them are being successful because they're constantly featured on the Roblox pages. And so when new people come in, that's where they go first, and they buy the virtual goods or whatever of that store. So taking care of that distribution is key, is to get the content in. And it kind of excites people and give them a good reason to build something, because they have a chance of having millions of people using it.
Yeah.
So this is why distribution is key.
That's really interesting. So games shouldn't. So this sort of like next evolution of games as platforms, they really want to follow that being the app store and the game and the content creation. They want to do everything in one package because that's optimal.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's kind of building a whole ecosystem that they can fully control instead of relying on Apple, discoverability in the App Store. If you have the whole thing, and you can just tell your creators, okay, here is we're always taking Roblox example because they are like the poster child of this revolution. But you use Roblox, you can build your mini games. There's no code required. You don't need to worry about how to market it. Just press a button. If people upvote it, you will appear on top of the list. It's kind of a meritocracy in this sense. And then that brings us to the third one, which is how do you capitalize on the value of that reach? And it's monetization. It's how do you make money from this audience? Again, on the internet, in the early days, you could create things. You could have blogs, and I don't know if you had a blog. I had a blog for a while. Not necessarily very popular, but I didn't make a penny from it. There was no. I think it was called. Well, there was Blogger, obviously, but in France we had Skyrock. It's called Skyrock. There was no. They didn't have any monetization options. It's like you share it with your friends, and they make the money. They have ads in there, which they are cashing in. What becomes interesting is if they take care of the monetization, but they pass some of the revenue back to the creators, right? And so then now I'm incentivized to write more blog posts or to build better games because all of that audience, I can actually capitalize on it myself. And I think this is really the last step. It's creation, distribution, monetization. If you get these three things right, and you have a system that is easy to use, that's when the whole thing really starts to explode. And that's exactly what happened on the internet. Now you have millions of people, millions of small businesses making money with Google, Google Ads or other systems, and they literally millions and millions of businesses only survive because they're ranking well in Google. That's how they get their business. So I think the same thing can happen in games. It might be difficult to visualize, but we talked about how games are just a 3D version of the internet. It's just, think of each game as a website. It just happens to be in 3D. And so instead of just reading or browsing content, you're walking through the content. You can still purchase things. You can still talk to people. You can still meet new friends. In addition, you have this hook, this thing that you need to complete inside the game. But yeah, that's how we see it.
The monetization side of it is really fascinating to me. So if we talk about the three major games that we're talking about so far anyway, so Roblox, Minecraft, and Fortnite, to me, there's this weird sort of scale. So Roblox makes a lot of money as a company. They're filing for IPO soon. They're doing very well. And they allow their users to make money as well. Similar to Second Life, they can sell games and you get good revenue from that. Minecraft makes a lot of money as a company, but they don't have many direct ways for their users to generate their own revenue. Right. There are like you can become there are people who are Minecraft architects, and that's their job. They build cities and statues for companies, which is crazy.
And they contract that, right, on the side.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's not controlled by Minecraft, right?
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And then you've got Fortnite, which is like, there isn't really any opportunity for the users to make money in that game. Because while it's a great social space, which we've spoken about, it's not something where you're creating permanent structures or anything like that. I wanted to ask, how important is it, in your opinion, that the users of these platforms can make money as well as the platform themselves? Is that a key part of this revolution, or is it just a...
Yeah, I think I would say that if that's not the case, then we should not call them platforms. For now, exactly as Tim Sweeney is saying, Fortnite is still a game. There's a lot happening in there, but it's controlled by, it's not an ecosystem, right? No, there's no, the only incentive that people have is it's fun to play. But, that can get old pretty quickly. That requires a lot of new content from Fortnite themselves, whereas Roblox is not building that much themselves. And this is what I mean. They're just an enabler. They're just a platform, and they let their creators build. And to incentivize creators to build, you need to give them access to distribution and monetization. So for me, it's an integral part of it. And if you don't do that, you just become a version of the internet where, it's just controlled by one company, but no one else can contribute to it, which would be much, 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 much smaller. Because if you think of how many businesses are built on top of optimizing one part of the value chain, like, Stripe, WordPress, AWS, segment.com, like all these tools, they are there to help people build on top of an already existing infrastructure. And then on top of that, you have even more specialized tools that just plug on top. And this is where you have all these layers of infrastructure and innovation. If there is no creators, everyone are just kind of players, and they can't benefit it, then all growth is coming from that one company building the game. And so, of course, it's going to be capped. And I would make a prediction that, I don't know, in the next couple of years, Fortnite will enable you to sell things, custom things. You'll be able to build your own maps or levels. They will definitely relax some of the controls that they have. I think it's really smart that they control the very beginning to really shape the world the way they want it to be shaped, and not just leave it totally open, like Second Life, which ended up being, mainly like the red district pretty much everywhere you go, right? And like advertisement for like right-wing politicians in France, at least. So it was a dodgy place because it was not controlled, right? So you need that element of control, but to be a true platform, you need to let your players benefit from it, for sure.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I see an interesting trend across all of these things with music as well. Music seems to have such an important place in a game becoming a platform. Like Second Life ended up making a lot of money from concerts. Fortnite has immense concerts, which they're more advertising than user generated. In Minecraft, you have people are doing actual like full-on concerts, but they're completely user-generated. Mojang don't see any of the money in that. In Roblox, you get a lot of user-generated concerts and stuff like that as well. I don't know if that's an important part of diagnosing a game that's going to become a platform, but it seems like musicians are drawn into these worlds, which it might maybe there's a conversation about these platform games as distribution platforms for other art, for like music or building 3D models.
Well, I think this is where you can see that gaming is becoming more than games, and it's really encompassing all the other entertainment channels, right? So, a few years ago, you would think, okay, entertainment, it's music, it's the cinema, and it's gaming, and they're kind of like on the same level. But now you can listen to music inside games and even watch movies inside games. So gaming is kind of swallowed the others and become more of an infrastructure to enable other art, which is, again, a very similar, it's a 3D version of the internet. That's really what it is. And I think, again, I think the Travis Scott concert, like 12 million people live at the same time. And was it Lil Nas or something in Roblox a few weeks ago or something, 33 million? Like, where are you going to have these numbers? Streaming on TikTok? I don't think so. Certainly not in real life. So this is the only place where you can get that type of numbers, and the engagement as well. I mean, the concert was amazing. It was like, 3D animations, and it was incredible. I think, it's a no-brainer that engagement and entertainment is going digital, and gaming is going to be the infrastructure to power all of that.
I'm really looking forward to seeing it evolve even more in the future. I know we've spoken about Somnium Space a lot as well. You mentioned it in your article. I don't know how much other content or other like mediums have entered Somnium Space. Like, has it had a concert, for example? Has it?
Yes. Small, it's smaller, much smaller, but they have, I think they have a weekly concerts. They have like stand-up as well, stand-up comedy. Yeah. So it's been really, really active, to be honest, which is great. And you know, it's a great way for artists to showcase their talent. And I think Somnium Space has this blockchain economy on top. So not only can you make money from the things that you sell, you actually own them legally. They're on the blockchain that is independent from the game itself. You own it, which brings yet another layer of ownership and really true platform. Now, it's the downside of that is a bit complex. You know, everything blockchain related requires to have a wallet and, you know, generally buy some cryptocurrency to actually get the assets. So it's not something that is mainstream just yet, but there's a lot of layers that can be built on top of that to abstract that and to basically use blockchain on the back end. But as a user, you don't really see it. So I think that's where the future is going to be. Usability needs to still remain on top of the priorities for these companies. But Somnium Space is probably the company that has pushed this whole gaming platform infrastructure the furthest that I know, because they have blockchain, they have an economy. You can build your own house and own the actual property space. So they've pushed it really, really far. It's really, really interesting. And they don't have, it's a small community, but it's an incredibly profitable community. Like their average revenue per user is like in the thousands, which is insane. And they've sold, you know, over $1 million, I think, this year in virtual land, as we've talked about before. So it's just really exciting. And yeah, the founder Arthur is also a visionary, so you should definitely keep an eye on them to see what I think a lot of the bigger guys are going to follow that space.
Really interesting. Okay. So sort of semi-related, one of the last things I wanted to talk about in this conversation is the opportunity for smaller developers in this platform world. So obviously creating these platforms is really hard and it takes a lot of investment that big companies tend to be able to do, but the smaller indie devs can't. Do you think there's going to be a growing pressure or at least trend on these smaller devs to build games within these platforms? Or do you think there's always going to be like this competition with an indie market which aren't platformized? They're just making games for the sake of making games?
Yeah, I think again, when the creation tools is easier, when the platform, takes care of the distribution for you, and they give you the best monetization tool. You know, if the platform makes it easier to create the game, easier to distribute it, and easier to monetize, then why wouldn't you use that platform to build? So I think, you know, as these tools, these platforms become better and better, it's going to become a no-brainer for indies to use the platforms. It's like, again, you know, let's do a parallel with the internet. Back in the day, you had to build your own backend. You have to have your own servers to actually host the damn thing, right? You can still do that today, but just ask an average startup, are they doing that, or are they using AWS? That's the thing. So it's going to be the same thing. It's going to happen the exact same way. There's going to be just another layer of infrastructure to get better creation tools, better distribution, better monetization. And then on top of that, again, other tools would come in, Admix being one of them on the monetization side. There will be other stuff on top. And you'll always be free to rebuild everything from scratch. But at some point, it just doesn't make any sense financially and from a resource perspective.
Okay. So here's an interesting development of that. If we follow the same model as the internet, do you think one day we'd get companies like Voodoo having entire branches dedicated to making games in something like Roblox because it becomes profitable enough? Or do you think that's an interesting prediction. I can't predict that. Yeah,
no, I wouldn't. And the same way that a big company like Facebook owns their own servers, right? So the big guys, they would want to do everything themselves because economies of scale and so on, and they can control everything. But it's only a few, right? So Voodoo, obviously, biggest publisher in the world when it comes to DAUs, will probably keep it to themselves and distribute it themselves, but they would actually probably become one of the platforms. They will probably productize a lot of things. They will enable everyone to create games and publish it through them. and help their publishers monetize too. So the big guys will become the platform, and the smaller guys will end up using the platforms until the next generation actually comes along and revolutionizes the whole thing. That's my prediction.
Interesting. I'm so curious to see how that goes. Like, I'm wondering if there are going to be these smaller studios that do become dedicated to making games in games. Yeah, maybe Voodoo is too big a beast right now. Yeah,
and consultancies, right? It's middlemen, like people building websites for others. Of course, people are going to build mini games for others. You already have, as you said, right? You had people, architects, experts in Second Life. So as soon as there is something, like people becoming experts and trying to sell the service to others. But that's great. That creates jobs. That's just it's not something that was possible 50 years ago. And I think the birth of gaming as a platform is going to create literally millions and millions of jobs, because there is the need to service all that audience. And so that these infrastructures are not just helping players to have fun, but they are really creating a new economy, a new digital economy. And if you look at the numbers of people that are consuming games, you can imagine that if all of that becomes a platform, this could have an impact that would be on the same level as the impact of the internet. I truly believe that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it certainly seems to be going that way. There's an increasing pressure to have these infinite games like Minecraft, like Fortnite, like Mario Maker to some extent. Like, it's a game that people contribute to, and it's essentially endless. That's only going to get bigger. I'm really fascinated to see how these platforms develop and what the new platform is, because Roblox is a household name, Minecraft is a household name. Fortnite, it came out of nowhere, but it is now a household name. What's the next big one going to be? So difficult to know.
That's a great question. Yeah, I don't know. I think if these platforms grow to really fast, we could end up in a situation where we only have a few platforms that control everything, which obviously would not necessarily be good. We have Google and Apple on mobile already. It would be great to have a bit more diversity when it comes to games and having more potential platforms. I'm sure a lot of smart people are working on that.
Yeah, so fascinating conversation. So I mean, we've spoken about the fact that history is repeating itself. The birth of the internet is happening again, except in games. The opportunity for indie devs, even in this gaming becoming a platform market, and the fact that this is somewhere that investors and advertisers should be looking. It's really fascinating stuff.
For sure, yeah, it is. It's one of my favorite topics. Looking at what happened in the past and how it could apply to now, and this innovation cycles is the best way to predict the future.
For sure. There you go. That's a good point to end on.
Thank you, Ian, and thanks everyone for listening. And I will see you next week for another episode.